Yeah, welcome to Fast Track to Compensation, revolutionizing the rail claims industry, rail claims with Drupal and AI. So firstly, my name is James or Jamie Abrahams. On Drupal.org, I'm Yat Jasatanu. I'm the co-founder of FreelyGive, a company specializing in both native Drupal CRM and now AI. And I'm a co-maintainer of the AI module and also the AI track in Drupal Starshot. And so this talk, I am going to be talking about AI, because that's all I talk about at the moment. It's what my obsession is. But I'm going to start with talking a bit about claims and this contacts module as well. So when we started getting into this, the rail compensation industry, the rail industry was not very good in the UK with compensation. There was a lot of controversy around it, discussions in Parliament about it, and there was a really big Which survey where they exposed how bad a lot of the rail companies were with paying out compensation. And the thing we focus on is specifically the case of delays. So if your train is delayed, you need to provide evidence that you're delayed, you upload a ticket, and then a system and a bunch of agents, people need to process that ticket, check if it's valid for that journey, is it actually delayed, how much money should we give back? And back then, you would only get compensation if the train was 30 minutes delayed, which for a commuter train is just huge. 30 minutes is a long time before you get anything. And then 60 minutes, you'd get 100% of your compensation back. And what they found is 88% of people who were eligible didn't claim. The Which survey went around and pretended to, just ask people questions or pretend to be a passenger and find out how easy it was to get any compensation. And 37% of the passengers, or the sort of pretend passengers, were given no or only partial information of even how to claim. And we also found these systems were very, very clunky. It would take a long time to process these claims. You'd be paying pennies sometimes back in compensation, but it would cost a lot to process those claims. It would cost a lot to the train operating companies. And sometimes they would have backlogs of months after some major rail disruptions. So we were called upon as a Drupal agency. We worked with a large call center that was specializing in rail stuff. And this person that we worked with was noticing that was an opportunity there to really revolutionize how the delay repay systems work to improve a lot of these things. As one, there was a huge governmental pressure to push for more people to claim. So it means that the already difficult systems that were taking months to process things were hopefully going to get 5-10 times more claims. And so we came along with, yes, and there was a number of challenges as well with processing claims. There were high volumes, but it's very spiky volumes. So like in terms of load balancing, it's very complicated because the websites and the forms and the front ends, they're not going to be used most of the time, but every so often you'll get a ginormous surge of claims coming along. Customer satisfaction is very important, and people are very angry when they're claiming. So if they're already angry and they're on a train and they want to claim, and then suddenly the form doesn't work, that just adds a lot of anger, which will then move to, well, at the time, everyone was using Twitter, so it would move to lots of Twitter stuff, etc. As I said, manual processing was very time-consuming and error-prone. It was quite difficult sometimes to even work out if a train had been delayed, especially with these very complex routes. And you needed fraud detection, and there was, at the time, very little fraud detection. It was relatively easy to pretend to reuse tickets, etc. So enter delay check. So it's a Drupal-powered solution. And we built this a while ago. It started on 7. It's been upgraded to 8, 9, 10, 11. And you can see there's a mobile app and there is a form. And this, as you can see from the menu, is a fully Drupal-based system. We were really big, and we still are, on native Drupal CRM, and we found there are so many benefits to actually using Drupal, which is traditionally used for front end, for content management, for web publishing, in this more business application CRM space. Obviously, commerce, that a lot of you will be familiar with, is somewhat more like a business application. The way I'd say it is that many Drupal agencies specialize in building websites where millions of people use it for 5, 10, 15 minutes. And we specialize in websites where hundreds of people use it, but for like 8 hours a day. And these CRM systems would allow us to build systems that were really, really front-end focused, because Drupal was very good at that. It was very good at making things that are designed well, easy to use, accessible, etc. So the start of this, the heart of it, was the form that we created that allowed people to register. But one major way that we reduce errors is that we could make it so that when you find your journey, you click on your boarding station, your destination station, and it's a find as you type field that selects an actual station with a station ID. And whilst this is all new, this is all standard to us right now, that was quite revolutionary when the whole old world was paper forms where people would write down the station name. And what you find is a lot of these train databases were set up in the 60s or 80s. The concept of a UUID did not exist. Unique IDs didn't really exist. Stations had no real taxonomy for what's the difference between a station, a calling point. Some larger stations were separated in different ones. So it got quite complicated, but we were able to work with some APIs to make it so that at the start of it, you could find the exact journey you intended. And by knowing the exact journey and the data about that exact journey, it's a lot easier to then calculate the delays. And you can see here, we could similarly move forwards with making it easier for people to upload their tickets, find a whole range of journeys, provide metadata so that you know their changes, etc. If their journey is not found, they can then tell us. And this helped significantly reduce errors by having a front-end form that worked well for the end user. But behind the scenes, we also could make an agent process for processing these claims that was specifically guided towards the workflow that they needed. They were using some larger tools. You would see things like Dynamics at the time was a big deal. And a lot of the CRM systems that people would build these systems out of, because they were starting off these clunky desktop applications, and they're all moving to web, because they were built not really to be customized very easily, and certainly not built to be end user friendly, to build web like what we're used to with websites. They would tend to, in order to build these things, have lots and lots of assumptions that weren't necessary for that particular use case. So you would have a huge amount of fields and data that an agent could fill in or not, but they just had to know, oh, don't use that one. There would be 4 or 5 different places to input or read an email field, and they just had to know that this is the good one and that one isn't. They would have things within pop-ups, within pop-ups, within pop-ups. A huge training regime was needed in order to be able to get someone to the place that was important to them. But with Drupal, we could customize everything. So we could build our forms that would guide people through the process of validating a claim. They would start with a summary. They would have a little bit of extra information of like tick crosses. So before they're clicking in and finding out the information that they need to do their work, they're already primed. Their sort of subconscious is getting ready to know what the context is of everything I'm looking at. And they could go through and process the claims. In every single one of these tabs, we were able to design it based around what is the most efficient way for them to process that particular task they needed to do to evaluate things. And so this is an example of that. And it was all based around open source. So we made the contacts module. It started with a project called Decoupled Auth. And what we would do is we'd take the user entity in Drupal, and we would strip out the authentication side of that user entity. And so that meant, and we'd optionally strip it out. So that means that a user no longer had a login sort of user account name, no longer needed a password, but that meant that user could then be the primary store, the primary thing in a CRM system. And then suddenly we had all the tools available to us in Drupal. We could use profiles to store information, but it was dynamic. Unlike normal bundles where the fields on a entity are set in stone and don't change, we can have profiles attached and detached from users that could replicate the dynamic nature that people are in real life and your interactions with people are in real life and how they change and the different ways in which you interact with them and your customers and the people that you work with. We could use views and search API to allow people to find contacts or things that they've done. We could use groups to connect people to other people and put, have a relationship between an organization and the individual. And so all of these tools that we're very familiar with in Drupal became very powerful when you started with this very small change of decoupling the authentication from a user. I was very young at the time. We were starting out on this, and I was getting to know the Drupal community, and Dries marked one of our issues in the issue queue to try and get it into the core of Drupal as one of his favorite issues. And I think it's only one of 8 now that are there. And that was like so exciting to me to have like a celebrity like one of my issues at the time. And what we found is that for the end user, for our client, Drupal offered some amazing benefits that they had never really seen before in the CRM systems they worked with. The speed that we could rapidly prototype was incredibly important. They would, as we were building this Delay Repay system, and it was quite new, they would approach these train operating companies. They would have a meeting, show something off, and say, yeah, this is great, but we don't quite work that way, or we'd like it like this, or this is a new feature that we really need. And we'd be able to spin up a prototype and show them within days. And now we can do things usually in hours, especially with the rise of AI and automators and things. And so the speed at which we could showcase that we can do something that is valuable to the end user was really powerful. But also things like configuration management. Again, a lot of you will be very used to these things. At the time, it was all stuff like to do with features, etc. But a lot of you will be very used to it. It's a very common part of our workflow. But in these CRM systems, it wasn't. And so what you would find is these other systems, they would build a really good, CRM tool for a particular purpose, like claims management. And then they would sell it to one client, and they would sell it to another client, and there would be small customizations and changes that you would need. So they would have to replicate the code and start building those in a separate place. And then another client would come along, and they'd have to do the same thing. And you would suddenly have like 6 or 7 different versions of the same software with slightly different features that would all expand and grow and web into different places. And so that when one client over here wanted that feature, you couldn't transfer it. When you had a bug that you'd fix here, it wouldn't necessarily fix it over here. And the technical debt just rolled and rolled and rolled. It got pretty terrible. And so they started feeling, and some of their clients would feel like, we just can't trust that anything we ask you to do will ever get done or will work ever. But this modular architecture of Drupal and with configuration management meant that we could keep a core base, and then we could have specific customizations that would sometimes live in config, sometimes new modules for each of those clients. We could also take our system and change it. There was one time we turned it from a Delay Repay system into a train operating company needed to just get rid of some money. So they made this competition based around have you moved to an e-card. And so we could repurpose the repayment aspect of the system to repay people who had this card on a kind of a raffle system. We've also found little bits of it, like the database of all the rail movements. They can be repurposed. And a lot of that is due to the power of how Drupal is architected. And immediately we had some pretty fantastic results. On average, claims were taking half an hour. And then with our new, it's still manual system. We haven't got to AI and automation yet, but we reduced it down to about 5 minutes per claim. Some of the more complex tasks that would really require digging to try and figure out, which particular route and how delayed it was. Sometimes it would take 2, 3, even 4 hours to process a single claim. When you're having to pay someone to do this, and the amount you're repaying the passenger is usually way less than you're paying that person. And it reduced it to about 30 minutes. I mean, these complex claims can be complex. As I said, the rail network is built over decades, and so sometimes you just don't have the information. Sometimes you have to infer it. But we were able to build tools that not just told you, oh, that train was delayed by that amount, but would show you things like the map of the route and where all the delays were, generally speaking. And so you would look at an empty piece of data and you don't know how delayed it was, but you'd be able to see how delayed it was before or after and infer pretty quickly, yeah, the passengers telling the truth. So we introduced a huge number of cost savings, increased efficiency for rail companies, and hugely increased the customer satisfaction. And around that time, they introduced Delay Repay 15, where you would get compensation for 15 minutes of delay, which increased the number of delays, claims by a huge amount. And so today, there is stats that show across the board, we've got 8 million claims in 2023, 98.8% of claims were made within 20 working days. It's all moved to online, 75% of their claimants made their compensation online. There's a huge amount of automation that has increased that. So Drupal's really improved, Drupal has, but there has been other competitors as well that really improved this whole process. But, and I'm sure many of you are much more excited by what I'm about to talk about, automation comes along. And instead of 5 minutes, you now have seconds. Unfortunately, it's never going to be instant because we literally don't have access to the data of how delayed that train is a lot of the time. You have to infer it. But with traditional automation, there were loads of things that we could do, like lookups for the ticket. The hardest part of the automation was automating specifically, is that ticket valid for that journey? So there's a lot we could do to improve that with traditional automation, and we did. Again, I think a lot of people here are more excited by Enter AI. And so, yeah, when ChatGPT first came along, as I think many of you here, I mean, who remembers how they felt when they first found out about ChatGPT? Can I get a show of hands? Has anyone got some memory? Okay, who had a generally positive experience when they first saw ChatGPT? Okay, and then who had like a negative response to it? Yeah, a few, yeah. Like, I mean, I had a few sleepless nights. I was like, this is over for us. I've been spending ages building this little Drupal agency. I'm going to be out of a job. Everything's over. What's the point of doing anything anymore? AI is just going to replace everything. I got over that. I started trying out AI stuff, and I found that actually, if you combine traditional OCR and some LLM, and I just tried it out with a ticket, it was pretty easy to validate that this ticket was valid for this particular journey. And what we found was, nowadays there's now vision models that can actually look at the image and look at the ticket. So it's significantly better for handling fraud, for handling like the reasoning processes of it. So we're going to get even better evaluation soon. I'll talk about what I mean by that. And then since then, we've built the AI module. Marcus, who's here, he was working on interpolators, which was a tool to use Drupal to really quickly do very simple automation. Well, no, quite complex automation within minutes. Somebody asked us to build something where they were struggling with creating socials from podcasts. They were part of a marketing team for a large enterprise. Having to sit down and listen to 2-hour-long podcasts to find the couple of little snippets that are useful for writing LinkedIn posts was usually a lot of work for not much value. And so they wanted something where we could download a podcast, transcribe it, know who's speaking, come up with a summary of the important points, come up with key quotes and reference them, and then create a LinkedIn post, a series of LinkedIn posts that they could post and know that these are right. And this is the kind of thing we were able to do with automators in like 20 minutes. It was a really quick thing. Marcus spent most of the time trying to style the LinkedIn post to look nice, but the core of it was very fast. So with all these tools that we've been able to use. So I want to start with like, what is AI good at? Like when we started doing this stuff in the train industry, we found that we're calling them primitives, but things that we know AI is very good at. And then when it does that one thing, it enables you as a developer to do a significant amount more value. There are people who would see AI when it came out and would rubbish it. Like, it can't count how many R's are in the word strawberry was a big thing that people were very upset about. It's very bad at maths, and it is. And so what we found with AI is that the things that we are good at as developers, AI tended to be bad at. And so as developers, we would look down on it because it's like, well, I can do that better than it. But what's actually the case is that there's things it's very good at that we as developers are so bad at that most of the time nobody even gives us that problem to solve because there's no point, they would never need it. And so a lot of developers don't have a good vision of the problem spaces a lot of organizations are struggling with. And so one of the biggest things that AI is fantastic at is taking unstructured data and turning it into something that's structured. So if we have something like a train ticket, you can do so much automation if we just know, well, what is the destination station? What is the origin station? What is the price, etc. You can do a lot of traditional automation now with your code, but that first bit is very, very difficult to do with traditional non-AI related tools. We did have stuff with OCR. There's things you can do with OCR where you can like roughly figure out, well, the word destination's here, this is the station, so I can look at the pixels of where that thing appears and infer that this is probably meaning destination or origin. But then everything dies as soon as like the picture's oriented slightly wrong. So what we found is even traditional OCR never quite did it, but when you combined it with LLMs, it became a lot more powerful. Same thing with sentiment analysis. In the migration example we gave in the Dries note, one of the things we were thinking of playing around with was migrating reviews from like a WordPress blog into a Drupal site. And in Drupal, we love structured stuff. We like fields that do stuff. So if you have reviews, you'd want to have, I don't know, if it's a book review, you want to have an author, the title, the genre, a 5-star review that's scored out of 5 stars that you can then filter in views. But a lot of people would naturally, if they're using WordPress, would gravitate towards storing all of that information in the body of the text on the blog, and maybe not in a consistent manner. Maybe sometimes it's 5 stars, sometimes it's thumbs up, sometimes it's a percentage, sometimes it's just a feel. But what you could do with Drupal, with AI, when you do a migration, is you get AI to read that blog, that review, and say, I think they wanted 4 out of 5 stars. And so the sentiment analysis is another form of taking unstructured data, but now this is implied unstructured data. It's in there, but it's not written down. That's what sentiment analysis really is. And you can then pull that out into something that is now structured. It's taxonomized, it's categorized, and now that it's categorized, you can start doing things with it. So many organizations pay ginormous numbers of people to just read through emails or news articles and triage it. And they just look at that email and go, I think this department needs it. And this is, again, a form of unstructured to structured data. It's not like a ticket where the data is written there, but it is something where there is in the text, in the sentiment, in the understanding, in the semantic stuff that you're reading, you can feel like, okay, that department needs to see this. It's really good at finding relevant information for you to do something with very quickly. The AI search with RAG is very good at like pulling out the important bits. Let's say you're doing automation with legal documents and you need to know addresses. It's very good at like finding the concept of address very quickly and pulling it out. You can do this with traditional search a bit, but it's a bit harder to really quickly pull out patterns of things rather than specific things. You can use regex as well, usually to infer an address. But again, that's a little bit more difficult. I was trying to do something with local politics, and I wanted to know which councillors were attending certain meetings and what had they said. And with traditional regex, you could probably pull out a name. You could probably find out what counts as a name, maybe. You'd see the word, I don't know, you'd see a title like doctor, infer the next thing is a name. But AI could see patterns and also know the difference between what is a councillor speaking and what is like a member of the public. So finding relevant information is a very powerful tool. And then as you saw in the Dries note, providing help with the UI. So how do you get it to do what you would like, what you want it to do? There was a period of time when everyone talked about prompt engineering as the cool skill. Everyone felt like, okay, well, our jobs as developers are over, but if you learn this new skill, prompt engineering, you'll be set for life. And there were cases where people with zero experience, there were jobs going around at the time that were like 200-300 grand for full-time prompt engineers. This mad rush for this new skill. And I remember at the time reading about prompt engineering, and there was these academic articles that I'd dig into about these new techniques. A big one was called Chain of Thought, like asking the AI to tell you its steps. Sorry, I'm just going to get a... But what we found was every single time I learned a new prompt engineering technique, the companies that made these models would bake it into the model itself, and you didn't need it anymore. One early thing we found is if you ask AI a question and go, think it through step by step. You just add this magic phrase at the end of everything. You would suddenly find your prompts could get it right way more often. And that felt really cool. It felt like we were like a special team of AI experts where we use this magic word and suddenly we produce more value than everyone else, pay us 300 grand, you know. But the thing is that, you know, now if you actually, you know, speak to ChatGPT 4.0 or Claude, it will usually say that as the first sentence. I'm going to think this through step by step. So it does it itself. So that kind of got removed. And there was this really cool tweet that I saw, which is, yeah, everyone thought prompt engineering is a skill one must learn to be competitive in the future. But the reality is prompting AI systems is no different than being an effective communicator with other humans. The same principles apply in both cases. This makes me bullish on reading, writing, and speaking as the 3 underlying skills that really matter in 2024. I heard this expression from someone the other day, which is you actually, everyone talks about AGI, artificial general intelligence, but all of us interact with HGI, human general intelligence, every day in every aspect of our life. And we have to learn, you likely work with and have deep relationships with HGI. Focusing on the skills necessary to effectively communicate with humans will be future-proof for you in a world with AGI. And we see that, like, if you're starting off in your career as a developer, the hard sciences are really, really great. Maths is really, really great. If you're learning to program, everyone will ask you to like do modulus for some reason, and then we never use any of that stuff for the rest of our life. But as you work your way up your career, even as a developer, you find actually communication skills become significantly more important. How do you present yourself? How do you communicate clearly? Carmack used to say that he thinks almost all software engineering is really a subset of communication, where you're writing your code in a way that could be understood by someone else, even if that someone else is you in 6 months' time. And so I think this is the heart of good prompt engineering is, you know, looking at the English language, looking at journalism, looking at philosophy. What do you want? What do you mean? Why did you ask for that thing? And being able to communicate that. So I imagine, the way I like to think about prompt engineering is imagine you have an intern, you've been doing your job for like 10, 15 years, you have an intern and they are a genius. They're in the UK, so I'd say they're an Oxbridge graduate. They are amazing at pub quizzes. And they come along and they're totally green to everything. How would you talk to this intern and train them up in the thing that you do well? The other thing I think is, which I try to communicate to people a lot, and they struggle with this because they're used to working with engineers where they do want to give a lot of detail. And what I would say with AI is you should start as simply as possible. With Waterfall, you would plan for maybe a year, develop it for 5 years, produce some software. With Agile, we were really into, let's make working code quickly. And we'd have these cycles that would be like, let's just write our stories and get started in 2 weeks. We'll build something in a week and you have deliverable value. With AI, you should aim for minutes. When you're getting started on any new topic, what can you do in the next 5 minutes to solve that problem? And just try it out. Write the simplest, most rubbish prompt. Stick all your data in there that you're allowed to stick in there, and then just see what happens. And then do incredibly rapid iteration, because when you see how it responds to your very bad, simple prompt, you can then move forwards. The other thing I like to do is ask clients to think like how a human thinks, or tell me their thought processes. So if somebody's trying to use AI to evaluate something, they'll try to explain to me what it is we're evaluating. They'll try and tell me how they think I should solve this, or how the prompt should be written. And a lot of the time, what I want from someone is when you sit down and you evaluate a ticket, so you take a ticket and go, is it valid for this journey? I want to see, what does your brain do? Where do you look on the page? Do you look here? Do you start from the top left and read all the way through? Do you focus on something, and if it's good, you then read the whole thing? Because we don't, especially textbooks, we don't read books from start to finish a lot of the time. We scan first, find relevant information, then dig deeper. And so what I like to do is try and to tell our clients who we're working on AI, no, just show me your raw process, show me your mistakes, show me how you correct those mistakes. And what you'll tend to find is these actually translate really well for helping you build AI workflows. So, so one thing I want to communicate is a lot of people are very scared about AI. But I think AI is actually very safe. And I think there's ways in which we can make AI very safe. And I think I'm really into the phrase accountable AI. And I want to talk about what I mean by that today. Because there's this question of why do we believe that cars are safe? There's going to be something where every so often you look at the past and you think of all these humans doing this weird thing of like using lead on their skin. It's like, why did they do that ridiculous thing? And I think it is going to be something, unfortunately, that in a few thousand years, these cars that are these unbelievable death traps that we allow teenagers to drive around, it's a very scary, terrifying prospect. But we all believe they're safe. And why do we do that? And one of the reasons why is accountability, and the other reason is tests. So what we do is if you drive dangerously, even if you don't harm anyone, we hold you accountable for it. And the fact that we, throughout all society, hold people accountable for driving dangerously is a thing that makes us feel like cars are a lot safer than they could be. The other thing is we do tests. Before the car's made, we test that it is safe in lots of ways. The individuals who drive a car test it. And so one of the things I feel is really important to do AI in a safe way is you hold it accountable and you test it. And this is another reason why I think Drupal is going to be very powerful in the world of AI. So when I started doing this, I, within minutes, did my very simple prompt. I just stuck a whole bunch of stuff in there and tested, it could actually do it. It could take this ticket and validate that it was right. And I looked at the ticket and I knew it was right. And I did that for one ticket. But that's not going to convince anyone. I'm not going to be able to sell to any train operating company this completely new tech because I showed them a single ticket and it got it right once. And so what we did very quickly is we built evaluations. Unfortunately, in the AI module, we don't today have an evaluations framework, but it's very much, as soon as this stuff's taking off, I really want to build that into Drupal. But what an evaluation is in this case, it is, I'm going to take like 200, or we're about to do one that's going to be hopefully 1,000 or so, and it's all being vetted by a human. A human has tested and checked that these are all right. And then you take your prompt, your simple prompt, and you just run it against all 200. And then you get a whole bunch of statistics to show how good it is. And we can see we've started achieving close to 90% automation with like 95% automation with 90% success rate. And with these new vision models and the reasoning models, we think we're going to get really close to 100. Now, one thing to note, like in our tech world, if you're a bank and you're trying to build some software moving money around, you don't need close to 100. You need really close to 100. But the reality is a lot of the time, the space that AI is good at is taking things that were traditionally done by humans. And humans are not 100% accurate. We know the rates that the customer service agents would get things wrong. We can see the appeal rates. We can see which appeals get upheld and which ones don't. And so we don't need to get closer. We don't need to get to 100%. We need to get closer to like the 95%, 98% mark. And as you'll know, you'll get diminishing returns. Going from 50 to 90 is a lot easier than going from 90 to 95, which is a lot easier than 95 to 99, and then those final percentages are going to get harder and harder. But we don't need to go there. We need to make sure that we have a good appeals process, even if it's done by AI. And so what you can see is that we kind of got things better. We would do these prompts, and some were like 98% automation rate, but only 71% success rate. And then the tool would allow you to click on one of those runs and then see the sea of information so you can quickly scan and do some filters on which specific things it got wrong. And then you could see where the agent got it wrong. Sometimes we'd find actually the AI got it right, and we'd have to go back to the people that we were working with and double check it, and they would correct what the human had done. Because again, even in this, humans don't get things right 100% of the time. And then we could find those reasons why. For example, in our early things, if somebody uploaded a picture with more than one ticket in it, it would get very confused. So then we know, okay, now we can fix this. And so a large part of the prompt engineering on really big, commercially valuable things will be this process of running an evaluation, finding one thing wrong, fixing a prompt, rerunning it, and getting those statistics higher and higher and higher and higher. Yeah. And so my dream, and yeah, we call them evaluations, is what we're finding is that everyone who's doing any AI on a real level with real clients and real money that's happening, we're finding you actually almost want to start with evaluations. You want to think about what you're going to measure. And so whereas with LangChain, the earlier tool that everyone was using to build AI applications, their focus was on the things you could build really quickly. But you look at the newer frameworks like Llama Index, there's a really good tutorial they have online about how to use it. And episode 3 is how to build an evaluation. They start with how do you make something where I can test that the AI is doing a good job? And then you build stuff that fits it. So it's like test-driven development. And yeah, we're sort of talking about test-driven AI. Yeah, so humans, I'm not going to give exact numbers, obviously, but 90 to 100%. And what we found is we tried it with different models. So we have external AI, and these are, the ChatGPTs, the Claudes, etc., where they are services set somewhere else. You're sending off your prompt, and you get an answer back. And obviously, at the moment, they're best in class, and they achieved the best that we had, and then we think we're going to get a lot better soon. But we also tried it with internal. Now, that 70% is not fully accurate because we had some traditional automation there. But we did find with internal AI, and what I mean by that is an AI model that you have hosted on your own server. It's usually something that's open source. Usually it'll be something like Mistral, Gemma from Google, or Llama is obviously the bigger one. And you have that fully on your server. And what that means is if you're going to try and use AI for something that is very, very sensitive, maybe you've got GDPR concerns, maybe it's top secret or et cetera, or you're scared about some other tech company stealing your secrets, you can do that. And with the AI module and its abstraction layer, you can also do that. So this is results of accountable AI through testing. But the other thing that I think is very powerful and why I think Drupal is particularly special is human-centric AI. And so what this is having humans be able to double-check things all the time, have humans in a loop a lot of the time, or check a subset. So what we did with our agents is we didn't just say yes or no, is it valid, but we also said to it, if you're unsure, escalate it to a human, like you would do with first-line support. And the thing I think is really powerful about Drupal, and the reason why I don't think AI is going to kill all of our jobs, is that with Drupal, we primarily start with building things that have a UI. We start with building tools that allow a manual process to check those things. You saw the image alt text generator that we in the Dries note yesterday. There's already a field there that already exists for typing it in. So when I generate it with AI, I can see the text there and change it. This human-centric thing that Drupal has always been powerful at translates incredibly well to having accountable human-centric AI. Whereas if you have Llama Index, LangChain, these code-heavy libraries for building AI applications, you're then reliant on the developers exposing what they think they need to expose to the end user, which can happen, but it's a little bit scarier for human in the loop because the developers will very likely cut corners or quickly make certain bits that you can't see. Whereas Drupal, we really focus on everyone can see it. We also find that domain knowledge is so important. As a developer with AI, I just don't know how to do sentiment analysis for some of the things I'm asked to look at. If I'm looking in the medical industry, I don't know how to read a medical paper. I'm not someone who spends all my life looking at train tickets, although it's pretty close to that now, and I've got a 3-year-old son, so it's really close to that now. But they have it, and they're non-developers. So we need them to see the prompts. We need them to see the results, the evaluations, and then change it. And we need to work closely with them. And with Drupal, it's much easier to expose everything to them. Yeah, AI doesn't replace humans. It enhances their capabilities. And then the safe AI hosting. So we've talked about self-hosted. You can download your own tools. But we're seeing a lot of people move to things like, and really want things like AWS Bedrock, where you're used to storing your data on something like AWS. And you've already sorted out the GDPR issues with that. And what we're finding is Bedrock is adding more and more models to the suite of tools you can use. And so we were sponsored, thankfully, by Amazon to produce the AI provider AWS Bedrock. So with Drupal, you can connect it to AWS Bedrock. But what we're hoping to do is add more of the tools, like the vector databases, and there's some other tools like unstructured.io, which I can explain later, that are actually becoming more essential for AI. You don't just want the LM, you want a whole suite of these tools that process your data. And so you're going to want secure hosting for that, and self-hosted and some cloud hostings are approaches that larger clients may be more likely to want to go for. Yeah, so I'm a little bit over time. We've got about 5 minutes. FreelyGive.io, if you want to reach out, that's our website. Project/AI is the module, and we're very active on the issue queue. And if you're on Drupal Slack, we're in #AI all the time. So yeah, any questions? Yeah, Richard. Well, do you want to go? There's a microphone there, I think. Do you want to go to that microphone?
It's been a few months since I have been using this technique with it manually with Chat GTP, which is if I sort of know what I want to ask, but I'm thinking I'm already a bit uncertain, if I start typing it in and then wrap it around, what would be the best way to ask this question? So it's kind of a meta prompting. So I get it to tell me how to do a good prompt. I don't know if maybe in the last 6 to 9 months if things have improved or if that's a technique that you've ever found useful or...
Yeah, I definitely find that very useful. So I do find, I like starting simple, but then when you get more complex, I do find sometimes when I'm struggling to get the prompt right, asking, this is what I'm trying to achieve, could you write a good prompt for me? Or as you said, could you write a wrapper prompt? In the AI module itself, when we do things like with the assistance API, so that's like the config behind the chatbot that you saw in the Dries note yesterday, control the agents, the module itself provides a lot of hard-coded pre-prompts to make sure that you as an end user are less likely to make the kind of simple mistakes, especially because a lot of automation requires getting it to write JSON. And it will write JSON for you, but usually it will start with saying something like, thank you, yeah, I'm happy to help you with that way. And then it does it, which just ruins all of your automation. So you have to do a lot of things to try and make it work well, and we've hard-coded that. But we tend to hard-code it in configuration, so you can override that if you need to, but then only if you know what you're doing. I also find asking one technique in AI is to make it assume a role. So say you are a ticket expector agent, and this is what you're going to do. And sometimes those roles, it's quite helpful to ask AI to write the role to help it do its own thing. So that is a good, slightly more advanced prompt engineering technique of asking AI to help you with the prompts. Cool. We had another question. If you want to come to the front. Anyone who's got questions, it might be quicker because we don't have very much time if you come sort of hover near the mic or sit near it.
Hi, I'm J.R. Maroney from Simple Information in Washington. Are you using ChatGPT for the compensation system?
So this is built on the AI module, which has an abstraction layer. And so it allows us to easily swap out all the models. So I have done it with ChatGPT. I've done it with Claude. I've done it with Llama. Right this second, probably ChatGPT 1.0 would be the best for a problem like this. But only a few months ago, Claude was the best for all of these things. And then again, Llama have released a open source model called, it's called 405B. That is ChatGPT 4 level quality, but open source. And with Amazon Bedrock, Fireworks, Grok, but with a Q, not with a K, they support Llama, which is the open source one. Unfortunately, to self-host that, you need like 820 gig of video memory. So you need an unbelievably powerful machine. So it's still,
I was asking
available.
for the cost, because it seems like the volume is very high, so the GPU cost would be significant there.
Yeah, the cost wasn't very, very high. So we were charging per automation. But what we're finding is the costs are cents per thing that we deal with. We sometimes have some very complex prompts where we're trying to work on things to do with like creating whole Drupal themes from a image and Figma file. And those prompts can get up to like $3 or $4, maybe $5 if you're really doing something complex. But if you think about $5 for a prompt, that completely replaces the need to a front-end developer to build that theme initially. The savings are usually way worth the cost. And similarly, when it comes to climate change, a lot of people have looked at certain tasks that AI does and the costs, and it seems high. But when you compare it to things like the heating and lights that you would need to power the office that the developer is sitting in, it's not very expensive. So for anything where we're trying to do something real, we're finding the costs are not even worth thinking about. Now, if you were Facebook and you wanted to build an LLM that checked every single comment, that's probably going to be quite expensive, especially if the people using it aren't paying you anything. But as soon as you do anything that a human had to do before, the costs are basically, you just don't need to think about them, really.
Okay, great presentation. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Hello.
How you doing? So a question about the data that came out of your evaluations. I noticed that you had 0 false positives on every single metric, but several false negatives on the metrics. To me, that either indicates a strength or a weakness in the model or the process. How do you interpret that data? Essentially, what do you think that means, and how has that happened?
Yeah, so one thing is we optimized for that. So false positives were more important to us than false negatives. So that's one reason why, like when things were unsure, they were more likely to reject it. So that's why we skewed towards that. But yeah, I mean, I think I would love it if the evaluation had a 99.9% false positive rating rather than a 99 by the other way. And also, as you can imagine, in the rail industry, we don't have very much stats on how often humans get it wrong. True. Because if somebody false positively pays you some money, you're probably not going to complain about it and appeal that I shouldn't have had this. So the false positive stuff is complicated to compare. But yeah, I think my hope is as we get to higher and higher numbers, we're going to start seeing at least one failed false positive.
Gotcha.
It's going to be complicated because I think, maybe to sell to a client 100% looks nicer, and to sell to anyone who does data 99.9 would look a lot nicer.
Perfect. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Great
thanks.
presentation.
Cool. Is there any more questions? I think we're kind of out of time. Well, it's about the right place, but yeah, if not, I'm going to be hanging out in the contribution room. Me, Marcus, and Frederick are going to be giving an AI talk in the auditorium at 12:15. It's going to be more like a panel thing where think of any questions you want to ask us about AI generally. We're going to be able to talk about that, although we've got some pre-prepared questions. And I'll be around the contrib room a lot if anyone wants to chat about this or, work on some things or have some ideas what you want to figure out how to build. Otherwise, thank you for being here. It's very early in the morning. I'm surprised a lot of you turned up for this. So yeah, thanks a lot.